Coming up on Unpacked.
I waited for the platform to be empty, and then I jumped in front of the underground train. I lost consciousness, but I woke up underneath the train and I could feel rats crawling around me.
Do you think you'd try and take your life again? Our guest today chats to us about his personal journey with depression and a suicide attempt. It's a painful one, it's heart-wrenching, but he has overcome, and this is his story. In 2012, Daryl Brown moved from Cape Town, South Africa to England to study for a postgraduate degree and find happiness. In September 2013, he tried to commit suicide by jumping in front of a London Underground train. But miraculously, his life was spared. As a result, nothing would be the same again. Today, he shares his battle with depression and some of the events that led to him attempting to end it all. This is Daryl Brown's story. Let's unpack. Daryl Brown, our guest for today, joins us via video con. Daryl, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Lebo.
So I'm going to dive right into the heart of this conversation. You made headlines for a suicide attempt, and you've spoken openly about your journey and the pain of you suffering with depression. Take us back to where it all began for you, your first recollection of the fact that, hey, there might be something not right here.
I was 12 years old the first time I thought about killing myself. I'd been bullied in school for being gay, even though I didn't really know what that meant at the time. I just knew that it was something that was terrible and something that I shouldn't be because, it was used as I was just hearing it from the bullies.
So it was used as a weapon against you.
Exactly. And I think intrinsically, I kind of was born with an optimistic spirit. So I kept thinking, okay, when I move to high school, everything will be okay. When I move to university, everything will be okay. When I start a new job, everything will be okay. And I kept waiting for this one day when everything would be okay. And eventually I reached a point where I couldn't wait for that day anymore because I didn't know if it was ever going to come. And I'd lost all hope. I just wanted to go to sleep and never wake up.
Where would you say that optimism comes from? Because, you've touched on the fact that you would always tell yourself one day it's going to be okay. Is that a messaging that was affirmed in your home, or is that something that you would tell yourself?
That was something I would tell myself. I never cut myself or hurt myself. I just thought about killing myself, and I thought about how it would affect the people around me, how it would affect my family, and I couldn't go through with it then. So I kept thinking and telling myself that I just had to pull myself together, and if I sorted things out around myself, then it would change how I was feeling on the inside as well, which obviously doesn't work.
I'm going to ask, this is a very personal question, but it's more for our viewers to get a bit more clarity. Some people will say, I wanted to kill myself, as in they were actively thinking about ways to take their own lives. Whereas other people speak about the fact that they'll say, I wasn't really suicidal, but I thought it would be great if I didn't have to wake up tomorrow. Which was it for you? Was it an active, I want to do something about the fact that I no longer want to be here?
I struggled with depression for about 10 years before I actually attempted suicide. And so I think I went through phases where I was planning and thinking how I could do it and, the best way. And then phases when I would be like, okay, I can get through this. Something's going to change. So I'd say a bit of both at different times in my life. But when I actually attempted suicide, I was living in London, and that had kind of been, moving to London had been my last ditch attempt at kind of curing my depression and fixing what was going on. And when I left South Africa, I kind of had in my mind, okay, if this doesn't work, then that's it, then I'm done.
Can I just take you back, to while you're still in the family home? What was happening at home at that time? Was your family aware of the fact that you were suffering? Or was it a complete secret? Because you say at the age of 12 is the first time that you had these thoughts. Were people around you aware?
Nobody knew that's how I was feeling. My family knew that I was being bullied, but they didn't know how bad it was. And, you know, my parents were going through struggles in their relationship, and they were struggling financially. So I didn't want to add to their burden with, you know, telling them about what was going on with me. I thought I just kind of had to pull myself together and get through it. And I used to look at everyone else around me, and I would look at my parents, and I'd be like, everyone has issues, everyone has struggles, and everyone else seems to be dealing with it. You know, what's wrong with me that I can't cope with this? Yeah.
And did you have siblings growing up, or it was literally you and your parents?
I have one younger brother. He's 4 years younger than me. And he actually got into a fight with another boy in his class once who called me a faggot. And my brother, you know, hit him, and they got into a fight. So my brother and I, we love each other, and you know, we're always there for each other, but we were never very close. We're completely different. You know, we have different interests. We have different personalities. So I wouldn't say we were ever super close, but we looked out for each other.
I want to touch on what you mentioned, you know, about the fact that you were teased about being gay. And because it's such a big part of your story, I wouldn't want somebody at home thinking, oh, he was depressed because he was gay, or he didn't know he was gay. Maybe share with the viewers that are watching at home, how would you, now that you have all the information, consolidate your depression in relation to you coming out or not being open or not having figured out being bullied and your homosexuality?
I think the root of my depression might have started because I was being bullied for being gay. So I grew up in a very religious home, and even after I'd left school, I was very involved in a local church. And so I struggled to reconcile my sexuality with, you know, what I was being taught at church, you know, that homosexuality was wrong and sinful. And for years, I would pray and fast and ask God to heal me and make me straight. So I think not being able to accept that part of myself and always feeling that there was something wrong with me was a big factor in the development of my depression. But because I was so young when it started, you know, depression, it changes the way your brain works. It changes the hormones that are released. It changes the neural pathways in your brain. And I was so young, my brain was still developing, my body was still developing. So struggling with depression for that long and from such a young age, it changed the way that my brain worked as well. So I think by the time I attempted suicide, it wasn't just about being gay or about being bullied or about religion. It was also a chemical imbalance inside of me.
And I think it was just very important that I asked that question, because there will be many young boys and girls who are grappling with those thoughts of trying to figure out who they are, of issues of their sexuality, and why that has a certain relationship with mental health. So let's fast forward now. You know, you've gone through this experience. When was it eventually that you realized this is who I am? When was it that you shared it? And did that actually make things better in terms of how you were feeling about yourself? Or is it something that you just continued to hide and that made things 10 times worse?
I think when I eventually decided to come out, I was already 23 years old. And like I say, for a long time, I'd, you know, tried to change and prayed for God to heal me. And I actually went to a pastor who was associated with an ex-gay ministry. So they kind of taught people not to be gay, and they had like ex-gay camps.
Wow.
And he started mentoring me. And for the first time, I could share myself completely. I could talk about things that I'd been experiencing that I'd never been able to talk to anyone else about, because, you know, he was also ex-gay. And so he could understand what I was going through. And
can I just interrupt for a second? Do you currently believe in that concept of ex-gay?
Absolutely not. It doesn't work.
Okay.
And I think
No, just wanted to clarify, yes.
I think it's very painful and damaging to the people who try to go through programs like that. And the president of the international ministry that kind of oversaw this guy that I was talking to, he actually denounced the ministry a few years later.
Wow.
And banded, yes. And he apologized for, all the damage that they'd done to people.
And I think that's very powerful for that to happen, because the other day I saw a gospel artist that was speaking about the fact that he's still attracted to men, but the way the headline referred to him as former gay. And I was like, is that even a thing? Because can you be former gay? So just for clarity, you don't believe in previously gay, either are or you aren't.
Yes, and that's how you're born. It's not something that you can teach or something that you can learn or unlearn.
Yes, yes.
Anyway, so I started being mentored by this guy who was supposed to be making me straight. And like I said, opened up to him the way I'd never been able to anyone else. And so I developed a little bit of a crush on him. And then after about 2 months, I lost my virginity to this guy.
Wow.
And then,
isn't that so ironic?
Totally.
Like completely ironic that the person who is trying to teach you to no longer be gay affirms it in some way.
Exactly. And for a week after that, I tried to contact him. I sent him messages and I tried to call him and he didn't reply, he didn't answer. And eventually he said, I love you and but we can never tell anyone about this because it's wrong, it's sinful, but we can keep helping each other out this way physically. And
what?
Then I was like, yes, exactly. I was like, this is, I don't know if I can swear on your show, but anyway, I was like, this is terrible. And that was it for me. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I have to come out. And it also felt like the closer I got to God and the more spiritual I became, the more being gay became a part of myself. It felt more like it was me. So I came out and it was very liberating. It was great, but it didn't cure the depression because by that time it had, like I say, taken root in me and it had changed the way my body worked. It changed my thought patterns and the way that I looked at myself and looked at the world. And even coming out, for so many years, I tried to hide the fact that I was gay, so I wouldn't listen to pop music or I wouldn't dress too fashionably, anything that I could do to try and not appear gay. And even after I came out for many, many years, I had to unlearn those behaviors of trying to hide my sexuality.
And was that your way of protecting yourself?
Absolutely. All I wanted when I was younger was to fit in and to be accepted and to be part of something. And so I did whatever I thought I could to be accepted and to get into the group. So
for all these years that you are speaking about suffering depression, were you on any medication? Were you in therapy? Were you getting any treatment? Or this really was a solo battle that you were facing on your own?
I never told anyone about it. I thought, no therapist is going to be able to say something that's magically going to make everything better. I didn't want to rely on medication or chemicals to make me feel a certain way. I didn't understand depression and I didn't understand how therapy worked or how medication could help me. And now I'm on antidepressants and I still have talking therapy once a month. And I think it's amazing. Like, if that's what you need to do to be the person that you want to be and to engage in relationships, then I think that's the responsible thing to do. I mean, if you're a diabetic, you take your insulin. If you're HIV positive, you take your antiretrovirals. There's no difference. If you're sick, if you have depression or any kind of mental illness, take the medication because that enables you to be the father you want to be the husband you want to be the friend that you want to be.
So let's fast forward to now this major event that was completely life-changing for you. This was your suicide attempt. You've already spoken to us about the journey that you've been through, how your homosexuality contributed, and the fact that you were suffering this depression on your own. What were the events leading up to you deciding to take your own life? You already touched on being in London.
So I moved to London. I was doing my master's degree there, but that was more of just an excuse to like get to the city.
You had actually mentioned that this was your last hope. So had you told yourself that maybe if I get a fresh change of scenery, I will feel better? Is that what you had in mind at the time?
So I'd been to visit a friend of mine in London about a year earlier. And as soon as I stepped off the plane, for the first time, I felt like I was at home. I felt like I could breathe. It felt like the first place that I could be myself. And so I thought, okay, if I move there, then, I can start over and maybe that will cure my depression. But obviously my depression was inside of me. It came with me to London. And at first things were great. I had my first romantic relationship there. I started studying. I, became part of the gay scene for the first time in my life. And it was fantastic. But after about 6 months, my relationship ended and I was devastated by that. I also wasn't doing as well as I had hoped to at university. And I was really struggling to get a job so that I could stay on in London after I finished my master's degree. And I just felt like everything in my life was a failure. I felt like I was the failure and I was the common denominator in all of these things in my life that were going wrong. And that, everywhere I went, things just went bad. Felt like I would have to move back in with my parents and leech off them forever. And I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't wait for that day when everything might be okay, not knowing if it was ever going to come. And so I told all my friends in London that I was moving back to Cape Town. I deactivated my Facebook account so that they wouldn't know I hadn't come back to Cape Town. I finished my master's degree. I gave my landlord a month's notice, just tying up all the loose ends. And then on a Sunday afternoon, I packed my suitcase and I went down to the nearest tube station and I waited for the platform to be empty. And then I jumped in front of the underground train.
What year was this and how old were you at the time?
This was 2013 and I had just turned 26.
And was this your first suicide attempt?
Yes. Yeah, it's been my only suicide attempt so far.
And it's obviously very, it's not, I would say, the most common of methodology that people use. So what was the reason that you opted to jump in front of a train and not try to do something that might be less painful, less traumatic?
I thought, it would be foolproof that, I would never be able to survive that. And I didn't want to slit my wrists or hang myself or something in my flat, so for my flatmates to find. I didn't want to leave a mess for them to find. And I thought, this method would be simple and easy and foolproof. But obviously I did survive. And however, I lost both my legs in the suicide attempt. So I use a wheelchair now.
So maybe just chat to us so we just can get a bit of an understanding. And I'll come back to the important detail that you've mentioned is that now you don't have both your legs and you're in a wheelchair. Is in the build up to this whole massive event of your first and only suicide attempt, which is quite life-changing and scary, you had been planning. Was this something that you'd been planning for like a month, or it's something that was in your mind for much longer?
I'd maybe been planning it for what had been in my mind for about 3 months. But I really started putting the plans into motion a month before it actually happened. I delayed it for that long because I wanted to make sure I finished my master's degree, because I was like, just in case I do survive, I don't want all this work to be for nothing.
And it's so interesting that you say that, because a part of me feels like, did he have hope? You say you tied up all these loose ends, but I was listening to you say, I made sure I finished my master's degree, and I wasn't sure if you did that because you wanted that in your obituary, they say he completed his master's degree, or because there was a part of you that was like, if something should happen, I want to say I had my master's degree.
Yes, I think it was kind of a backup plan. Like I thought, okay, if I survive, it wasn't really important to me about an obituary or it didn't really matter to me if anyone else knew that I'd completed it, but I wanted for myself to not have wasted all those months of, doing all the work for the master's degree and then not finishing it if I actually survived.
Was it a backup plan, or was it this tiny little young Daryl that is optimistic and hopeful that things will still be okay and I will make it out of this?
It might have been a little bit of a young Daryl, little bit of, okay, maybe after this things will change and things will get better.
Okay, so you get to the platform. You've already told yourself that you don't want to inconvenience other people. You wait for the platform to be empty. Talk me through those moments that build up, that lead up to you deciding to jump.
So I waited for the platform to be empty because I didn't want anyone to see. I didn't want any witnesses. I thought it would be, I don't know, I wouldn't like to see that. I think it would be quite traumatic to witness something like that. And then my mind was amazingly clear, from the moment that I actually decided to do this a month earlier. It was like a huge fog just lifted off me. Just this peace came over me because then I could tell myself, okay, it's just a few more weeks, it's just a few more days, and then this will all be over. Then you'll be at peace. So as I was waiting for the train to come, I just kind of took a breath, and I wasn't very religious at all anymore then, but I did say a little prayer. I did just say, God, please save my soul, which I also think was kind of a just in case move, just in case there is something, just in case there is a God, like, let me end this on good terms. And then I waited for the train to come, and as I heard it coming, I just took a step. And it was weird because the first time I stood on an underground train platform, even when I was visiting my friend in London, you can feel the train coming, like through the soles of your feet on the platform. And it was almost as if my feet got this itch, just take one step. It's so easy. It's right there.
So now you've jumped. Were you conscious? Were you aware that, hey, I'm alive, or what happened then?
No, it was the impact of the train that severed my legs. And I wasn't 100% sure. I was still like hoping, okay, maybe this is all just in my imagination. Maybe my legs are still there. And I lay there and I kept hoping to lose consciousness again, because I knew that if I lose consciousness again, there's still a chance that this could work, that I might still die. But my first thought really when I woke up was like, are you freaking kidding me? It didn't work. Like, I can't even get this right. And I could hear people getting off the train above me. And after a while, I started hearing the rescue team crawling towards me from the front of the train. And at that point, they didn't know that I was still alive. And the pain started, I started regaining some sensation, and my legs really started paining then. And the pain got stronger and stronger. But I kept on thinking about, it was a Sunday afternoon. I kept thinking the people on the train are, little old ladies and parents taking kids to the museum and stuff. And I was like, I can't scream now because that would traumatize them. So I just tried to hold it in and try to, grit through the pain. But eventually I couldn't hold it anymore, especially since I heard the rescue team coming. So after a while, I just said, please, it hurts, come faster. And And there was just this like dead silence, like they'd stopped moving. And then suddenly I could hear them moving with a little more urgency. And eventually the rest of the team got to me. And the first guy introduced himself to me. I can't remember his name. And they were wearing these hats with, lights on the front. And I asked him, my legs are gone, right? And he looked down at my waist and my legs, and he turned to the person behind him and he just said, "This is a mess." And then I lost consciousness again. But I found out later that they tried to reattach one of my legs on the train platform after they dragged me out. But when I was in hospital, it got infected, and so they had to remove it anyway. And after that, I was in hospital for about 4 months. I was in the trauma ward of the first hospital for about 3 months. And I think I only regained consciousness maybe a week after the actual incident.
And who was the first support system that actually, because you'd been carrying this big secret, who was the first person that actually, that you saw at the hospital, that you spoke to, that was like, what happened? Are you okay? Who was that first person and what did they say to you?
The first person that made an impression on me was actually a nurse, a young male nurse. And I'm not sure how long after the incident it was, but I regained consciousness and they were prodding me and, shining lights in my eyes and trying to, get me to respond. But I was just resisting. I was like, this can still work. I can still lose consciousness and die. So I played dead and I pretended that I wasn't conscious. And so the doctors told the nurses to wheel me to another room to do some tests, I think to do like an MRI scan because I wasn't responding. And they were wheeling me down the passage and the one nurse asked the other one, "Where are we going?" And he told him about the MRI. And then I opened my eyes and the nurse just came up to me and he took my hand and he said, "Hey, I'm Chris. You're with us. We thought you were dead, we thought you weren't here." And then, and I said, I wanted to be dead. I was still hoping that it might work. And he didn't really know what to say to that, but he kept holding my hand and he didn't let go of my hand until we got to our destination. And that meant so much to me. Afterwards, when I fully regained consciousness, a team of psychiatrists came to see me and they immediately put me on antidepressants. And they checked all of my depression symptoms, how I was eating and sleeping and concentrating and all of that. But they didn't do any talking therapy with me. They just put me on antidepressants and kind of monitored my depression symptoms. In my preparation for the suicide attempt, I put a letter with my mom's contact details in it in my suitcase on the platform, just to say, this is my next of kin, please contact her and let her know. But in the whole situation, the letter somehow got lost. So the doctors, the hospital didn't know who to contact. They didn't know who to get in touch with about me. And my parents, I'd sent a suicide letter in an email to my mom, just explaining everything that I'd been going through and my reasons for taking my life. But I'd sent it to her work email address on a Sunday afternoon, and I knew she wouldn't get it until the next day when she got to work. So by that time, it would be too late to do anything. So my mom got it on the Monday morning and she was frantic. And she didn't know who to get in touch with. She didn't know how to find me or to find out what happened to me. She didn't know if I was alive or dead.
So in essence, at the time, your only support system ended up being the people around you because your family didn't even know. They didn't get the news for a while.
Absolutely. The nurses, mostly the nurses who, fed me and who were there all the time, bathing me and changing my bed linen. They were the people I had the most contact with, and they were lovely. They made me feel so safe and looked after. They made a massive impression on me. And eventually my parents got in touch with Interpol, and it took Interpol 3 days to find me. And in those 3 days, my parents didn't know if I was alive or dead, or what was happening to me. But as soon as they found me, my mom got a visa and came over to see me as soon as she could. And then, for a month after she arrived, she stayed with me and she came to sit by my bed every single day for hours. And I was so angry at that time. I was angry with myself for what I'd done. I was angry with the universe for not
actually following through with your plans with you.
Exactly. Yeah. I kind of felt like I was all the way up to the gates of heaven and just being spat back down to earth.
So Daryl, fast forward for us to now you are home. You've already mentioned that you've, spent all this time in hospital. Your mom was with you. The two of you went through, obviously grappling with the difficulty of where you were in your mind, that you're angry that it didn't work out. You're angry at yourself for having done it. You're angry with where you are in life. Let's fast forward to now you're home, you're back. How does that part of your journey end, the healing part of your journey?
So my first talking therapy session with the psychologist was really the turning point for me. And, at first I spoke to her the same way I'd always spoken to everyone, wearing this mask of everything is fine, I'm going to be okay. But she saw through it within 5 minutes. And for the first time in many, many years, I kind of felt real hope that there was someone who understood and there was someone who could kind of guide me through this. The antidepressants and the talking therapy both helped me, but I feel like I appreciated the talking therapy more because I felt like it equipped me, it gave me tools to kind of manage my mental health on my own. It felt like it was empowering me. And when I came back to South Africa, I got involved with the South African Depression and Anxiety Group because many of my friends came to me afterwards and said, "We're so sorry you've been going through this. I've actually been in therapy myself for years." And I realized so many of us had been going through the same thing, but we'd never opened up to each other. We'd never spoken to each other about it because we were ashamed. And there was this whole stigma attached to it. So I got involved with the South African Depression and Anxiety Group because I felt like the only way we can make it okay for people to talk about their mental health and to ask for help when they need it is if people like me who have kind of been through the worst of it are open about our stories and show that you can have depression or bipolar disorder or anxiety or whatever and still live a productive life, still be happy. And I am happy. I have a fulfilling life, even though I still have depression. It's something that I can manage.
And just one thing we didn't touch on is the fact that, you've spoken about in your healing journey, what has happened with the depression. You haven't touched on you now having to learn to live with a disability. Can you quickly share how you were able to deal with that transition?
Sure. So I had a month of physical therapy where I was in the gym for 6 hours every day of the week. But in many ways, coming to terms with my physical disability was much easier than actually dealing with my depression because you're confronted with your physical disability every single day. You have to find a way to get to the toilet.
You can't avoid it.
Exactly. So you figure it out quickly because you have to. You don't have a choice. Whereas for so many years, I kind of pushed the depression to the back of my mind and tried to ignore it. But actually bringing it into focus and working through it was much harder.
We're at that point now where we get to the part of the conversation where we say, where are you now?
So now I have a full-time job. I'm working still in the marketing industry, but I've also got an honors degree in psychology. I wanted to be able to kind of help others the way my therapist had helped me. And I've also started performing in concerts, and I performed in a production of South Pacific at the Artscape Opera House in 2019. And that's always been a dream of mine, to sing and act on stage. And I never thought I would be able to do something like that now that I'm in a wheelchair, but it's been amazing. And I feel like I've broken so many boundaries and attempted so many things that I would never have tried if I hadn't had all of these obstacles in my way. I think I don't regret what I did because, it has brought me to this point, and it's because of it, I've met so many people that I would never have known otherwise. I've had so many experiences that I would never have known otherwise, and I can't wish all of that out of my life. But I do miss having legs. I miss dancing. But I've made the most of my life, and I have a great support system. I have fantastic friends. My family has actually become closer since my suicide attempt. I think we all realized, we have to tell each other that we love each other. Because I think often you just assume that the people in your life know that you care about them. And so you don't have to say anything. But, hearing it, saying those words, taking the time to spend time together, it really makes a difference.
So with all of that that you've said, all that you've experienced, all the knowledge you've gained, even outside of the fact that you now have, a psychology qualification and that you've worked with organizations like the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, what would you say the young person listening that is connecting with something you're saying, what would you say they should look out for, maybe even know or be aware of in terms of the depression journey, but maybe also you can touch on you coming out as homosexual and on top of that, now being somebody living with a disability?
I think no matter who you are, no matter what you're dealing with, it's always better to be open about it and to ask for help if you need it. You're not alone. There are people who care, and if you're in trouble, talk to someone. I think the most important thing is no matter what your obstacles or challenges are, just love yourself. You were created the way you were for a reason, and no one else can give the world, the exact combination of personality and talents and skills that you've got. You are unique, and we need that. We need you.
So, Daryl, do you think where you are in your recovery, because depression is still something that you're facing on a day-to-day, do you think you'd try and take your life again?
I don't think so. I've never seriously contemplated suicide again since my first attempt. And although I do still have my depression, and I think I'll probably have it for the rest of my life, it is, I don't know, it's part of me. And I think, I'm just I'm one of those people who is just prone to it now, but I can manage it. I've learned how to look out for the warning signs. I know how to look after my mental health, make sure I'm doing things that I love, make sure I'm getting enough sleep and exercising and eating well, healthily. All of those things create an atmosphere or create an environment in your body that is conducive to good mental health. So I think, everyone has a responsibility to look after their mental health, and everyone has mental health. It's not just people who are struggling with their mental health. Just the way everyone has physical health, you have to go to the gym, you have to get exercise to look after yourself. And it's the same with your mental health. Everyone has to look after it and do what they can to keep it healthy.
Such an amazing story. And for me, the most important thing is that it ends in hope. And I hope that some of you watching, or even all of you watching, found something in this journey that you can connect with. And yes, while we need to also be asking for help, let's look out for those around us, especially those that seem like they're strong or they're doing okay. Let's check in on our loved ones. Our socials are on your screens. Make sure you get in touch. Chat to us. Good night. Next time on Unpacked.
It's all those things that happened. And I just tried to be a brave human being. The first time this comes up now.
Was the intention to actually take your life?
The intention was to end my life.
Unpacked with Relebogile Mabotja. New episodes weekdays at 5:30 p.m. on my YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Television edited broadcasts weekdays at 5 p.m. Open up to S3.